Hi, Laura. How
Hey,
are you?
I'm good, Herb. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Get a,
Where did my-
there we go.
Oh, so, good morning, all.
Good morning.
Hello,
There I
John.
Herb, I see John. I see a Wellfleet Zoom one. I'm not sure who that is.
I think that's our host.
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So Tom Slack is not with us yet. He is. John Dwayne, it shows you being muted. Morning, Tom.
Hi, I had to sign in with a meeting number and password, not the link on the town website, but so it goes.
Many roads lead to Rome. I
Ah,
think I see John. Hi, John. Good morning.
Good job. Good morning, everybody.
morning.
So we have a fairly busy schedule. I'll now call to order. The only thing I wanted to add to the agenda was some news about the Wellfleet Harbor Conference. We'll talk about that later in the meeting. If I don't see any people available for public comment, so we'll go right into the ponds plan. I think Herb and Laura, would you just give us a brief update on where we are and what's coming next?
Or you, me? What-
Why don't you go since you had the conversation directly with Sophia?
Okay. To bring everybody up to date, we're very much working in a phase of gathering data. And we've met with Conscom, with John and Laura, and on that. We've met with APCC, it was very helpful. And I met with Sophia Fox on the 22nd of March. And she's also, everybody's been very helpful. They're very happy that we're starting this project. We still have a lot to go, but with Sophia Fox, I went over the 8 ponds that we wanted to include in the study, which are basically all those which have public access. And she has suggested that we include Spectacle Pond, which turns out to be one of the most, from the seashore's point of view, one of the most highly accessed ponds. Number of people who go there. We've been exploring with everyone we've spoken to who has authority to regulate the ponds. And John has also, John, you spoke to CCNS on this as well.
Yeah.
And it is at best unclear who has authority over the regulation of the ponds. That is, whether it's in what areas it's state, town, or seashore. And we may eventually request the selectmen to allow us to get use town council to get readings on this, to get a resolution on this in the areas that are going to be important to us. I think we've come to an agreement so far that step one of this plan has got to be a baseline, a baseline statement of the health of the ponds that are in question in terms of chemical composition, clarity, the temperature, oxygen of the ponds, and that the aim of this 10-year plan should be that we the people do nothing to cause degradation to the ponds over the next 10 years. We have found that we've been told that the vast source of nutrients into the ponds is septic systems. That is groundwater flow from septic systems. And it's going to be, we believe, critical for the pond that there be advanced septic systems. I don't think there's any hope of sewers in our area. Advanced septic systems, but those septic systems to be effective for the ponds are going to have to be those that are developed that eliminate or reduce phosphates in addition to nitrates. Laura, what have I missed so far?
Well, in our meeting with Conscom, we gave a similar summary of what we're looking to do. They were, as Herb said, super supportive. We have drafted a letter to go to Hillary, as they indicated that they were working on a septic and cesspool census. So we felt like getting that type of information would at least give us a baseline of where systems are good, where systems aren't so good. And as we move forward and figure out, is there a correlation between where ponds are failing? Is there a way to get people to improve their septic system or get rid of their cesspool? So one of the items on John's list today is to look at the letter that we've drafted to go to Hillary. Let's see, so that's Conscom, Sophia. And I think one of the other takeaways just is that as Herb and I have been talking, we feel like a lot of the data gathering is going to take us a little longer horizon than maybe we thought initially, just because it's a complex environmental scene. There are lots of pieces to the puzzle. So we are thinking that it's probably going to take us the vast majority of this year to meet with people and pull items together in terms of figuring out just where we are as a baseline and where we want to go and what it all means.
And this would mean that in terms of the timing, is Laura and I have been thinking that our goal and the time for this plan should be, assuming there's going to be an expense involved in whatever we propose, that the goal should be to have warrants in the 2023 ATM meeting, which would mean we would have to have the plan finalized in January 2023 to know what warrants would be, what expenses would be needed, and what warrants would follow from that.
John, Tom, do you have any comments? This is a necessary, it's an ambitious project, but I think we're making good progress. Any questions or comments that you'd like to? Then I have a few of my own.
No, it sounds like you guys are putting in a lot of, time and work on this. And if you need help from, the rest of the committee to join in with some of this stuff, I think we could all work on it.
Good. Noted.
Mhm.
So
Mm.
that presentation, I'm not sure whether it was SAB or whether it was us, but those new septic systems that were coming out that had used the wood chips that reduced nitrates considerably. I don't know if folks remember that, but that seems
Yeah.
to be the new technology that was actually more affordable than some of the new IA systems that had come out. I don't know that they required monitoring, but the question I have is, does that new system design deal with the phosphates?
No,
No,
unfortunately.
nothing to do with phosphates. So how do we deal with phosphates?
There are two groups that are, we've been given two names to study, who are doing studies on this. And one is Baumgartner,
Brian,
Brian Baumgartner, working with the Barnstable County at APCC. And then at the meeting we had with, was it Conscom?
I think it was, you said Emily Michelle?
Yes.
Yeah,
And we have to follow up with both those people to see where they are. But it's not close. Nobody's telling us it's close. When I met with Sophia, she told me that at the Seashore Visitor Center, they have the wood chip system in there. But she pointed out that it's not, none of them are yet DEP approved. Which is the first time I heard that, by the way.
I thought that might be just the fact that there hasn't been enough of them in the ground to get approval yet. Is that, I seem to remember that presentation, there was only like one or two installed in the whole state, I thought.
Yeah, it could very well be. But we know, we want to talk to the two people who are working on, with the two groups that are working on the removal of phosphates in septic systems.
Well,
Okay.
is there any data from other places in the country that are working on this? Or, I mean, obviously, this is not just a problem generic to Cape Cod, but any scientific literature or anything about phosphate removal from septic systems?
I don't know, Tom.
Hmm.
I don't
good
know.
thought. We'll look around.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. One little tidbit I picked up in discussing the discussion with Sophia, the restroom at the Cape Cod National Seashore Visitor Center there is the most used restroom on Cape Cod. You wanna tuck
Believe that.
that away as a little note. I don't know how they got that statistic definitive on it.
Caught everybody going in every
We'll let
rest.
him claim it.
So a couple thoughts or comments of my own. I mean, I think you guys are making great progress. I think there's a lot of good planning for this summer. And maybe one of the most important things we can do now is just be patient and see what the numbers show us. I would like to hear more about the projects to get phosphorus sensitive chips in the ground. Because that in terms of implementation, that's critical. So I suppose one thing we could do is sometime later in this year, get each of these 2 projects to come report to us. I just made a note that I will ask Kurt Felix, who's in charge of the wastewater committee, and he probably has some insight into where a good phosphorus project is, even though it's not directly a concern to him. So I'll just ask him to see if he has any information. If Laura, Herb, if you could send us the names of the 2 people involved, I could use them in the email to Kurt and see what he's heard. I would like some sort of report to the select board over the following winter after we've had a summer's work. Mostly just to let them know where we are and what we're doing. It doesn't have to be a final conclusion. I think that will be premature. I had another. Oh, this question of legal authority. There are two more points. This is one of them. The legal authority. I think it's fairly clear that the Board of Health has authority over septic systems, broadly taken. So that the authority to approve novel septic systems, to require people to upgrade to Title V or Title V Plus, I think that comes from the Board of Health, because all of that is not actually in the ponds, it's adjacent to the ponds. And the other thing is, it's pretty clear that the town of Wellfleet has authority over the beaches at the various ponds. And between the 2 of them, I think Hillary and Suzanne would accept that responsibility. It looks like it's gonna be very unclear as to who actually owns or has authority over the pond, but I'm wondering if for the specific tasks that we're undertaking, it maybe shouldn't hinder us. I think those are my main concerns. I think we're on the right direction. I would I hope you've all read the draft letter that Herb and Laura want to send to Hillary. And if you have I'd appreciate a motion to authorize that on our behalf.
I would move that we accept the letter as written to be forwarded to Hillary.
I'll second.
All in favor, just raise your hand. Okay, so that, Laura, go ahead and do that. It's a good letter.
Laura, in the text of it, the last 2 letters of my name are transposed in the text.
I'm sorry, I do that all the time. I apologize.
I do, but just, that's all. And John, the only thing, coming back to you on the clarity of the access to the ponds through the town, that's definite. The town definitely has town beaches and access points on Gull, Long, and Great, and has control over those. Now, the seashore has a couple other ponds, beaches on the pond, which they maintain and are theirs.
Right.
And they seem to have the authority, well, they do have the authority to create another beach or access point if they so wish to do so, which they have done.
Who has the access to Duck Pond? I thought that was Wellfleet also.
I believe that is Wellfleet. That's
Yeah,
Wellfleet. Yes.
It is.
Hmm.
And actually, there's also an access to Higgins Pond. It's off the sluiceway.
Yes.
I don't know that's used for boating, but it's used mostly for fishermen.
Yes, that was designed for fishermen.
Right.
And then on Long, the seashore opened up that second small access point a year ago.
Which had been Suzanne Thomas's family's.
Yeah.
Herb through John, I guess, can I ask you, you mentioned earlier that Spectacle Pond was the most heavily used. That was according to the seashore, is that right?
Well, it was interesting what Sophia said, yeah, and I do want to be clear on that. It's not the most heavily used,
Yeah, right.
but of the ponds, the access points which the seashore has directly, that's the one that gets the most visitors. Now, not, again, that's the distinction that has to be made. It's the seashore access points to the ponds.
They've
Spectacle
got
Pond gets the most,
Spectacle and Dyer. And what else?
get the most visitors.
The most of the ponds directly that are controlled, the access points controlled directly and only by the seashore.
Huh.
Spectacle Ponds Landing is not a town of Wellfleet oversight item.
No, it's not.
It's just
Hmm.
seashore,
It's just seashore.
as is Dyer.
Yes.
Dyer is too?
So
just-
that's surprising. It's surprising to me to hear that. Is that because they don't charge to get in there?
Well, no, it's just because the others, you don't charge to get in there. You don't need a
Or Wellfleet sticker, yeah.
Wellfleet sticker.
But you can't get to them either without a little work.
Yeah, it's just in relationship to the other ponds which they have direct access to. Which
Okay.
only the seashore provides the access to. It's not to be compared with Gull Pond or Long Pond in terms of the number of visitors. I don't go to them.
Tiny.
I'm surprised to hear that because the access road is terrible and it's just, I'm surprised. I don't even know how they could quantify. I go infrequently to the ponds, but that's where I go usually if I go. And there's very rarely anybody there, but I don't go in the summertime. Maybe
I was gonna
that's
say in the summertime, there's lots of people there if you
what-
want.
I bet.
Yeah.
I had two, I just made a note to myself. I had two further comments. I think the testing we have underway and the understanding of how septic systems works, we have a good idea of where the nitrogen and phosphorus from those sources could get to the pond. Two of the ponds, Gull and Long particularly, have very active town beaches. And I thought it'd be interesting to suggest to Sophia that some of the sampling in those two ponds take place very, very close to the beach. I think I know in the case of Gull Pond, there's a safety barrier. So just outside that safety barrier, for example, I'd like to know how much of the pollution, if you like, for those ponds comes from beach use. And it may be that it's virtually nothing, or maybe it's a lot and we have to include some remedy in our thinking.
Yeah.
The second thing is, I would like all members of the committee to engage in a little summer activity about 5 o'clock on a summer afternoon. Take a look at the parking especially at Long Pond, because it's very small, but also at Gull Pond. And just keep a record of how many cars are parked there without a Wellfleet parking sticker. I know Suzanne Thomas checks on that. But the people that are hired for the station coming in, the welcoming station, it was supposed to at least 4, if that. And it's if we find that there are a significant number of non-Wellfleet cars there, then we ought to go to Suzanne and say, well, how can we deal with this, because they're putting an extra burden on the ponds. So both those comments are about what happens at the beaches. Apart from that, we're good to go. There's a lot of work, but the setup has been very well done. Any further thoughts before we move on to the harbor survey?
Want to talk to John Portnoy. Years and years ago, and I mentioned this to him, reminded him of it once. He had something called a septic snooper. And they dragged a device around the edge of the ponds to see if they could find plumes from septic systems. And I'd really like to get back to him and
I think you feel free to make the contacts that you need to make. Just keep us informed. I'm sure John would. Asking John about this beach issue, which I just brought up, might be very interesting to hear what his comments there are.
Yeah.
And if he's got one of these snoopers that you just drag by, well.
No, that was years. And that was in the seashore had it. I have no idea what.
I know that was.
Yeah.
John did an awful lot of ponds work before he got involved in the Herring River project. Harbor survey, which both John and I have been working on. First thing, any thoughts about the document, which is the sort of a summary of the project, which would be the basis for a request for proposals, RFPs? Any language you think that should be changed? Anything left out?
Would
Are you
just
talking about
remind
that?
me- Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
are you
harbor
talking about
survey.
that one that I just circulated around, or is there something else? That I
No,
missed?
this is the one that's part of the it was part of the agenda for this meeting.
It's the RFP.
Yeah, the RFP, right.
Okay, I remember that, yeah.
Just can you help me, just give me a ballpark estimate of what you believe the responses will be financial it's a request for proposal, it's a request for financial, for the cost of
Right.
doing. We have a ballpark of what we expect? A range?
Well,
60,000.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the number we were gonna put up for the article, right, John?
Yes.
Hmm.
But is there any comment on the substance of what is written out?
Well, we talked about the water quality thing last time. And I guess the only question I had on that, is that going to to add more cost to the thing, or is it, I guess it is important that we include that in there, I think, but it's another sort of direction of the study, not just the the curly sort of enumerating various fish and fish species and so forth. So I guess that was our thought last time, is that it was important to include this as part of the proposal.
Right. I don't think that's a major cost item.
Yeah.
Once you've got boats and people out in the harbor doing all the fish and shellfish samples, doing the water sampling and getting some basic data out of the water is not, the one thing that might add a cost is the phytoplankton, because that may be a more complicated test, but we'll wait and see. I guess, Tom, you're sort of opening the door to what I called strategy, and let me express some concerns and then see whether I'm going down a path that doesn't need to be gone down. There is an article in the current draft of the town warrant to put an article for to fund, to approve of and fund this project for a maximum of 60,000 is on the warrant. And the funds are to come from money available in the town after everything else has been paid for. There will be another meeting of the Board of Selectmen in 10 days to absolutely finalize the plan. And I know that there are some current members of the select board which would prefer to change the funding to a loan. And that would mean that the money wouldn't come out of the current town funds, it would be borrowed somewhere. But the way those two methods of funding are approved is quite different. If it just comes out of the town budget, it's a majority vote, one majority vote, and you're done and gone. If it's a loan, it's a two-step process. It requires, first of all, a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And then that article goes onto the ballot at a town election and requires 50%. And I'm just concerned that given it's widely known within the town that we're on a very tight path for funds, that the select board may say, well, we have to do it by a loan, and given that loan also requires an election vote, I feel somewhat uncomfortable about getting that by. So I had a third possibility, and that is that we ask the select board to withdraw the article, but that John and I proceed to take the harbor survey and turn it into a request for proposals. And John and I have a list of people who we think would be possible responders. Ask them to respond by the 1st of August. We come to a final decision by the 1st of September. And then what would go on to the fall warrant, there'll be another election about the 10th of September, town election, would be for that response. And thinking of Tom's concern, that would be for the exact amount of money that the winning proposal has agreed to. I'm not a wonderful politician, but
Oh,
that's.
don't sell
what I
yourself
think
short,
about.
John.
I'd be interested in comments and thoughts and
Well,
concerns. I think in terms of the date when the project actually started, both approaches are the same. It's just a question of how we want to go about it.
well, one thing this does is get you away from what we were talking about at the last meeting and having a specific number down there, which, you know, would be on the warrant that the whoever receives the request for proposal will know, well, we can get at least 60,000 out of this. So maybe they'll come in with a lower amount. Maybe I'm a dreamer too. But
Well,
that's a good idea.
It will. Proposals are competitive,
Mhm.
and one of the advantages of an open proposal is that people will have to think exactly as Tom suggested. I guess the only thing that worries me about that, Tom, is if we get a proposal which is low cost, but if you have doubts about the provider, then you have to convince the town purchasing agent, whose name is Rebecca Ruffley, that you got to go with a somewhat more expensive proposal. But we started out last spring with a proposal, the same proposal. The select board put it on the agenda, but they didn't like the format. And so they pulled it because already they were worried about money. So I don't want to go through the same problem again. And I particularly don't want to lose a vote at town meeting. But as I say, I'm not a very good politician.
Well, I think there's, for one thing, there seems to be a growing sense in the town that not every good proposal, no matter how good it is, needs to be approved each time. I mean, we're getting ourselves, you know, far in debt with these 2.5% overrides or whatever. And I don't know, I have a feeling that people will say, well, you know, what are our priorities? Yes, we need a fire truck. Yes, we need this, but maybe we don't need this survey. So as important as we all believe it is, and it is, but so maybe pulling it off the warrant for this particular town meeting and getting more information and adding it in the fall might make some sense. I don't know.
John, can you remind me, where did the 60,000 come from? Was that just your gut or?
No, that's
Center for
sort
Coastal
of looking,
Studies.
looking how similar projects have been done. I don't want to say anything more about that. This is in a public meeting.
Yeah, no, I just meant, was it,
Yeah, it's not just pulled off a shelf.
right, there
it's got
was a
the background.
relativity to it. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I was asking.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But it does tie into my original question was, I think Laura and I were thinking the same, is that looks like a lot of work to get done, a lot of data to be gathered for $60,000, which
Mm.
kind of would go towards your suggestion, John, to get RFPs prior to putting an amount on a warrant.
Well, one of the nice things about that too is you can, that is Rebecca Ruffley and I can sit down and talk to the provider and say, look, this is a higher number than we thought. Let's see what we can do. We can negotiate. Frankly, what I'd really like to do is I would like to get some partnerships involved. Because I know from the list that John and I have talked about, there's some people who are stronger in one area and some people are stronger in the other. And it'd be great if we could figure out how to get them working together. And that might be possible by a fresh RFP. See what
Makes sense.
John, you're being very quiet. You're sort of
Yeah, I'm kind of
one
taking the
leader on
temperature.
this.
I'm taking the temperature of the board, and I'm also trying to gauge. I don't recall. My recollection is that trying to take the temperature of the select board, I think right now is fairly favorable. I don't know specifically how anybody would vote on the select board for this, but it seems to me they all think it's a good idea. And when it comes to money, I think you're right. I think getting a loan is going to be problematic. And I think that this is the kind of thing, and I can't remember who told it to me, but this is the kind of thing that the town should pay for. It's in the town's interest to do this. And, you know, again, town meetings come up and every time money's tight. Money's always tight. So next year it's not going to be any different.
Yeah. Hmm.
I think that when you consider how many people this touches, you're going to get at town meeting, no matter what we end up doing, there's going to be enough people speaking for it. There's always the folks that are the belt tighteners and they're not going to want to spend the money. But I think that a case can be made and people can be convinced that this is the right thing to do. It would be nice to have some idea or request for proposals prior, but I'm not so sure that that's a good idea, because once we get something approved, I've got questions about that, how that would work. But my sense is that again, I think that I'm trying to think of what the town administrator had said. First of all, when it comes to the funding of it, that he thinks that I seem to recall him saying that this is the kind of thing that you shouldn't borrow for it, that the town should pay for something like this.
Well, what I could do, John, and I don't know how much luck I'd have doing this. Well, first of all, we got an election coming up.
Right.
On Monday, and I don't know who's going to be elected, and I don't know the consequences. So I was about to say that I could contact Ryan and ask what he thought the sense of the board was at this point, but until we have an election, put new people in place, and there will be at least one new person, he's unlikely to answer that question quite properly, but I could still ask him.
when do the new members take their positions after the election? Is it right away?
I think that's a good question too.
Uh,
I can find that out from Rebecca Eldridge.
And of the three people running, DeVasto is the current member, and then the other two are vying for a third seat or a second seat, but then the third seat, which Helen is giving up, will be another election. Am I right on that?
Yeah, but that comes after town meeting.
But so all three of these will presumably be on the board at some point,
Let me think about
unless
that.
one of them drops out and doesn't run again for the Helen seat.
Let's see, we've got Ryan Curley and John Wolf. They're set.
Yeah,
And Helen, the vote to replace Helen doesn't happen until June. So right now we have 3 candidates for 2 slots.
right.
And as it happens, one of the candidates will have his name on the ballot and the other 2 would have to be strictly write-in. But two of the 3 are going to make it as of Monday evening.
I don't, unless there's
I kind
somebody,
of have a sense that I know how 2 of them would react, but I don't know how the third would react. And I won't go into, I'm not going to go into the politics of what I happen to think. But there's a lot of, let's put it this way, there's a lot of uncertainty about lots of things. And it's
well,
going to take a while for a new select board to sort itself out.
when it comes to who's going to be on the board, I almost think it's irrelevant. I think that there's going to be new members. I think we need to proceed ahead with this sense that we have a good argument to be made, that it needs to be done. I don't know. I guess it's not public information whether it gets pulled off the warrant again and put back on in the fall. But it seems to me this was, last year we were ready to go with it and decide and couldn't do it because of the format was wrong. And so we're starting again here. I think that it's just going to be a matter of selling it and letting people understand that this is something that needs to be done. It should be a regular part of the Wellfleet budget on a 10-year basis. Also, that's my personal opinion, but I think that this should be planned for. You need to be planning for how things are going to change in the harbor when you consider, I think, the stark difference between what happened 50 years ago and where we're at now is enough to say that, look, people understand baselines, I believe now. Most of the Wellfletians probably understand what baseline data means. And I think that establishing a baseline right now as to where we're at is important. I think it's going to be important for the town. And the amount of money that it takes, for me, it's a lot of money. But I think when it comes to the cost of doing the work that they're doing, I think that it seems to me that it's nobody's gouging us here when it comes to a proposal to do that. And if you could get a survey done for $60,000 for what we're looking for, I think that I almost consider it a bargain. So that's my personal take on it.
I thought of one way to sell the money, that the town budget this year is about 23 million. And the cost of this project is 0.06 million. So
There you go.
compared to the overall town budget, it really is fairly small. I just very skeptical about going through the process of a loan.
I don't want to, I think you're right about that. I think that's probably not going to be the best path to go.
So I guess what I have to do is maybe with some, I just keep my ear to the surface, to the ground, And if it looks like it's going to go to this loan process, I would ask that the warrant be removed. It's the warrant, the town warrant is still listed as a draft. It's not final, so that could be done. I mean, it would be our request, and we go through the process. John and I have taken the harbor survey language that we've got, and it'd be fairly easy to turn that into a request for proposal. John and I have some candidates. I think we've got 4 candidates. One of them I have to check into a bit and see where we go. It's an unfortunate situation, but of course, what's behind it being so unfortunate is the town finances got in a bad way, and we're all facing the consequences.
Can I ask you, John, is that 10-day, that meeting, the select board meeting in 10 days, is that when they're gonna decide about the how this would proceed, whether it's a loan or not a loan?
All I know is that the meeting, which happens 10 days from now, that is, say, a week from Tuesday coming, will be to finalize the warrant. So if now, one way I'm just thinking that I might be able to the agenda for that meeting has to be issued on the Friday before. So I might be able to, with a little help, to see if anyone has put on the agenda a review of this article
Okay,
and get some sense of which way the wind is blowing. I mean, doing something takes a risk, and not doing something takes a risk. So it's kind of a fun situation. I think, John, we've got a very strong case, but particularly when it my sense is that when you go to a town election on these various, not the town meeting, but the town election, you've got a lot of people who really are worry about the money, not the substance.
Hmm.
And this, you know, it's been 50 years since the last one, so people are likely to say, well, why not 51?
well, it's already been 51, so what we're really saying is 52 now.
Okay, you got the
So
point.
yeah, I know. I think that my sense is that it's a matter of getting enough overview of what we're going to get out of this and attaching maybe faces to who we're affecting by getting this done. You know, the cost of a harbor survey, 2 thoughts simply. One of them is the fact that there's been enough of these done now around Salem Sound, Pleasant Bay, so that we could get a good sense as to what the price is going to be without actually printing the price on the warrant or saying that this is what it's going to cost us. And so again, when it comes to the money, I think that there's, I guess this is a question as much as anything else. There's nothing wrong with, you know, whatever the price ends up being, if we're like $2,000 or $3,000 short, figuring either a way to negotiate with the folks that are doing the survey or soliciting funds from elsewhere. So soliciting funds from elsewhere is something that, again, years ago, the guy from Ocean River Institute, as an example, there's people out there that have money that would throw money at something like this. And maybe we could solicit money from elsewhere. But I think my sense is rather than pull it, or rather than try and get it funded through a loan, I think that the best course of action is to try to get it through as a straight up, let's finance it, let's let the town pay for it and figure out a way to make that work. And I think the cost is justified, and the people that are going to be against it because of the cost, there's nothing we're going to do. It's kind of like politics. There's nothing we're going to do to change their mind. And they're always going to think that it's too expensive and that the money is best spent elsewhere. But when you think of some of the other things that we're buying, new trucks, new vehicles, whatever, a new shack, anything, the other things that we're paying for, it's all part of, well, I kind of lost my train there, but I'm just thinking that, that there's a lot of things that we pay for in the town that just need to be budgeted on a regular basis. And I think this is one of them.
John, I agree with you. I'm pretty confident that if this is presented to the town as written, we're in good shape. If it goes to, the only concern is it, if it goes to a loan. I believe in planning for success. So,
Great.
John, what I'm going to do is take the harbor survey draft that we've had and turn it into the format for a request for proposal, so that work with Rebecca on that. So if it is on the warrant and is approved, we're good to go right away. If anyone hears, sees, or thinks over the next 10 days, couple of weeks of some information that might affect our decision, please let John and I know. Some other agenda items. Climate Change Committee. I've had a couple of, this is a committee, Dick Elkin is the head of it, had several good discussions with one of the members, Suzanne Ryan. And what they're interested in doing is better coordinating the activities of all the committees that are involved in various activities. And one example of something that came up is it was a little bit of misunderstanding on my part, but this climate change committee has gotten money from the county to do a survey of low-lying roads in Wellfleet, those roads which might be influenced by sea level rise. And Suzanne mentioned that one of the places they were doing some work is along Chequestic Neck Road as it goes by Powers Landing, because at that point Chequestic Neck Road is in a minimum, it's down low. And they said, okay, for protection against climate change, they have to raise it. And she said, well, we're going to raise it and then put some sort of little revetment to protect the road. And I got pretty nervous because that's a good way to speed up the erosion of the beach. Turns out I misunderstood what she said, but having that kind of coordination between people who are concerned with preserving a public beach and access and people who are concerned with protecting the roads against flooding, they need to talk to each other, and that committee is prepared to take a lead on that, and I think that's a good. I'm encouraged by that. So if you see some communication or information from them, that's something to pay attention to. The next item agenda I had written down is Rights of Public Access Committee, and I can't remember what I was thinking when I wrote it down. So I think it's just basically to be aware of the work that this committee is doing. I'm on that committee. They're concerned about access both for shell fishermen and for the general public. I think it's important that that committee also look at climate change coordinates, climate change consequences. But they're doing some interesting work. They recently got, something that took quite a while. As you go onto Lieutenant Island, just before you get to the bridge on the left, there's a beach that runs down to the south, and there's a puddle on that beach. And that puddle interferes with shellfishermen driving down the beach to get to a good shellfishing spot. And I personally think that puddle was caused in part by the trucks themselves spinning up some sand. But one of the things that the Rights of Public Access Committee did is to work with the Audubon, who owns the property, to fill in the puddle, and we'll see if that works. So that's something that's going to happen next fall. Tom, you raised the issue of, or I thought we might discuss the purchase of the Maurice campground.
Well, yeah, we had
$6.5 million.
Yeah, $6.5 million that the select board has agreed to and signed a purchase and sales agreement apparently, but this all, of course, will have to be approved in town meeting. Our only issue with the open space committee was that we just be kept in the loop on this. And it's right. It's an obvious need that the town needs affordable housing. We're just hoping that we can, kind of coordinate some corridor or an area along the bike path that might be left open. There's some nice areas in there that could certainly be compatible with the development of the affordable housing. This is all very preliminary, I guess, and there's an awful lot of questions being asked. There's a fact sheet floating around, which I don't know if any of you've seen, but it's talking about, what it's all about. And if I can find where mine is, I will send it out to all of you if you haven't seen it. So, I mean, this is just, I guess, very early in the game, and it seems as though as many interests that are involved in open space, natural resources, everything else should have some, say as to what happens in there. And I think they're thinking about looking the way Eastham sort of viewed the golf course thing. And I don't know if anybody happened to see the April 1st edition of the P-Town Independent, where it said that Eastham to return driving range property to a driving range. But anyway, it was a joke. But
But they give it away.
But the point is that there'll be lots of folks involved in a discussion of how this property is to be used or developed, if in fact it goes through the purchase process. So
it did trigger a thought on my behalf, Tom, And I'm starting to think about how this committee is organized and functioning. And frankly, in part, it's because at some point, I need to face up that my participation will be less and less. So we've got a ponds team. Herb and Laura and Herb. We've really got a harbor team, which is John and myself, and I'm confident in letting John take more and more of that responsibility. But I think it works well for both of us. And Tom, what I thought, and this goes back to your link to the Open Space Committee, is there are a lot of opportunities in this town for environmental protection, environmental development, which aren't on either the shore or the ponds. And one that came to I've thought about a couple of times in the past is the Eversource cut through the town for the power lines. Actually is could potentially be a great birding spot because it's a kind of habitat which is known as second growth habitat, and there's evidence from various ornithological studies in the state of Massachusetts that birds in those habitats are not doing very well because there isn't much of that habitat. So I sort of in my thinking, Thomas, how we're organized, you're the one team member of the uplands issues for this committee, but it's directly connected to the link of open space. And maybe I could put my ideas in more coherent form and we could talk to the Open Space Committee and see if this, I think we're going to run out of properties for Open Space Committee to turn into conservation properties. So we ought to do something with the stuff we have.
Well, that makes sense.
So last thing on my minutes is I'm on a committee which is making a plan for a Wellfleet Harbor Conference, 5th of November, which is a Saturday. And for the past couple of years, this has been purely Zoom. And we're hoping that by November, the COVID risk has diminished to the extent that we can have an actual in-person meeting at the elementary school. And we've got some good I think some good speakers lined up. This will be I think nearly the 20th year of having a Wellfleet Harbor Conference. And NRAB was the original sponsor. It's now being pretty much run by Audubon. And one of the consequences of NRAB being the original sponsor is that the money, we have from time to time raised money to support this conference. That money is in a special account in the town of Wellfleet, treasurer's log. Not the treasurers, actually the accountants. The accountants keep track of it. And I talked to the chief accountant this morning, and he said he would look into it. What I'm proposing is that we transfer the money and the responsibility from NRAB to Audubon, because Audubon is basically running the project, and we just don't have the time to take a lead on this. So I think I would make a proposal that we do that. And I think, just to be clear, that we would need a vote, which I will ask for. But if there's any questions or discussions, please let me know.
You know how much we have in that account or will have, John?
It's about 1,200 right now. And the meeting this year would only be it would start at 9 and end at noon. In past years, we started at 9 and ended at 2, and we had lunch in between, which is a very nice social occasion, but we're not doing that this year. So the major expense is for the elementary school staff, who have to help us set up the meeting, put chairs in place, take them down, and all that. And that runs, I think the price is going up, but in the past it's been about $600. So if I remember correctly, we've already got that money in hand. It just, what we're really doing is just simplifying the process so that Jeanette Kerr at the sanctuary is the one that runs the process, and she can not only set up the agenda, but also help pay for school expenses.
I should know this, John. I'm on the committee, but does the Audubon have an interest in taking this responsibility on? Are they going to be able to continue the Harbor Conference into the future?
Yes. They're very supportive.
They seem to be, they're the ones that have been running it pretty much up until now anyways, correct?
Right. It's been several years since it's always been run by a committee, and members of the committee, myself, John Portnoy, Barbara Brennesell, have been on the committee for a long, long time. And all Jeanette does is really help coordinate what the committee comes up with. But there are expenses, and it'd just be a lot easier to put that all in the place of the coordinator. It also, in a small way, simplifies the role of the town accountants, because they're only keeping track of one account for NRAB, not two. So there is a motion on the floor. If we agree, I need a second and a vote. If we don't agree, we can discuss further.
Did you make the motion then, John, or?
I made a motion.
Okay, I'll second it.
Okay. On the floor for discussion. All
See,
right. Well,
Makes sense, John.
what?
It makes sense.
Okay.
I think
All
it
in
does
favor?
too. Well, all right, just. to
Go ahead,
discuss it.
John, if you have a
Yeah.
comment. Sorry, I didn't
Yeah,
want to
my own-
override you.
Sure. My only sense is it sounds like we're severing the relationship between the town and the conference. So this is no longer going to be the town of Wellfleet State of Harbor Conference. It's going to be an Audubon production. And I don't know. I'm just not sure. it seems to me that, I don't think it's gonna turn anybody off, the fact that Audubon's running it. But I'm just wondering what the ramifications are gonna be of severing that relationship. In general, I think it's a good idea, but that's my only concern. And also, I guess the other question I got is, where did that $1,200 come from?
Oh, Cape Cod 5 was a donor. I think the other bank in town was a donor. Audubon itself gave some money. I think we used to give money out of our $1,500. So NRAB was a donor. When we had lunch, the Rollwich Place provided the food at a discount, so they effectively were a donor. I think those were the main sources of money.
Do you think that any of those donors will be reticent about giving us the money if it's instead of giving it to the town, they're giving it to the Audubon?
Well, it was I raised a lot of money. It was always pretty clear that this was going to the conference, and it was that the town was only providing accounting support to have the money stowed away someplace. Anytime there was a payment and a check was needed, I signed the check on behalf of NRAB.
Okay, do you think that Jeanette and Audubon will be able to solicit funding just as we've been doing all the way up until now, uninterrupted? You know what I mean? I'm trying to figure out if they're going to be taking that on too. They're going to be coming up with the money in the future.
I think actually, John, you raise a good point, and maybe the next meeting of the Harbor Conference, we ought. It shouldn't be just an Audubon. Audubon has stepped up to handle the implementation, but it should be for the town, and we ought to discuss how do we guarantee that. And that probably means that we should get other committees from the town involved in at least the process of, picking articles. We got to have someone from the Shellfish Board, someone from Conscom, things like that. So I'm quite happy to discuss that with the committee and then bring this back at a future meeting.
So you're gonna withdraw your motion then, John?
I'm withdrawing the motion.
Okay.
I think it's good. I think it's a good idea, and I think that we should figure out whether maybe Audubon would just be willing to take it on as part of their budget in the future. My concern is that instead of being a town project, this turns into an Audubon project. Again, thinking about where it goes on the town website, but I'll go along with what you just proposed.
Well,
It seems to me that if you just say that the conference is sponsored by Mass Audubon and the Wellfleet Natural Resources Advisory Board, whether or not we.
one thing I'm just thinking, one thing I could do and work this out with Jeanette is that, Audubon would have control of the money. We could leave it that the chairman of NRAB had to be a countersignature for any payments. And that would get the town directly involved.
It might be worth having a discussion with Audubon too, with Jeanette.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
see what they think about it.
okay.
You may want to stipulate in this that whatever happens, the conference continues to be called the Wellfleet Harbor Conference.
State of Wellfleet Harbor, yeah.
State of the Wellfleet, that's a prerequisite for whatever decisions are made.
One thing that we have always done, and it's my responsibility again this year, is we have invited a member of the select board to give a little opening talk. And so I'm going to ask Ryan Curley this year, because he's never the project sort of it went strictly online because of COVID. So this would be the first sort of open meeting again, where a select board member would be useful. I guess what I would do is the motion is still on the table, but I'd like to go ahead with the motion, but with the address the concerns that John and I were discussing as part of the process. It is a Wellfleet Harbor conference, and Audubon is simply helping us to be the operating function. So we have to be sure that the majority of the membership planning the conference comes from various committees around town, which it does now.
Just to be clear, we're talking about the Mass Bay Wildlife Sanctuary, not Audubon, not Mass Audubon, right?
Yeah, it's Mass Bay. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
This is a purely local.
right.
So now that I've thoroughly confused everyone, let's have a vote. All in favor of whatever it is we think we've voted for. Opposed?
I'm going to oppose it for the time being.
Okay. Anything else that we need to discuss? Thought it was a good meeting. I will ask everyone to keep ears to the ground, and we'll have to make some decision. By a week from today, basically, or a week from yesterday, by Thursday, what we do about the climate change article, not the harbor article. We're going to, I mean, the goal is to get it done, and we just need to find the best path to that. Great. Thank you all very much. Have a good weekend. And we'll stay in touch about particularly the harbor plan. And I will work with John on getting an RFP put together that can be put to fairly rapid use. We'll have to have another meeting to finalize approval of that. All set?
Okay,
That's all.
Thank
Okay.
you.
a lot.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah.